and welcome back to Practicing Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. My name is Sarah, and I'm here with my friend Lizelle. And today we're going to be talking about episode 9, which is called Insight. So, to begin, we're going to visit our philosopher, Plato.
Hello, world. I was reading this morning, and I was like, "Oh, I should share with Sarah as well." It's Socrates speaking in the Charmides. I'm so bad with all these pronunciations, but
Don't worry, me too.
and yes, I said, Critias, but you come to me as though I profess to know about the questions which I ask, and as though I could, if I only would, agree with you. Whereas the fact is that I am inquiring with you into the truth of that which is advanced from time to time, just because I do not know. And when I have inquired, I will say whether I agree with you or not. Please then to allow me time to reflect. I just thought it reminded of me of what we're doing here.
Me
Inquiring
too.
together.
That's funny because I was thinking back to like one of the first episodes when you were like, I don't know, we're doing this together. Because I'm like asking you, like, is that what he meant? Nice.
Yes.
Nice.
And I think it's appropriate because both of us had with the first part of this episode, we were like, okay. It's like,
Yeah. Okay, good. And it like, yeah, because we're thinking from a different perspective now, or using different frames, I guess, because now it's like cognitive science. Where from the start we've been going through a lot of philosophy, we moved a little bit into biology and science, and I felt really comfortable. I was like, yeah, it's picking up. And then we hit this one, I was like, ooh, there's a lot of dense words here, there's a lot of dense concepts, understanding some of the non-Cartesian models that he's presenting to. So yeah.
I have good news and I have bad news. He returns to the history of philosophy. Shortly after, he's going to do a few more on what is consciousness and higher states of consciousness, and then he returns a bit to the history of philosophy. But around episode 25 or 26, it's all cockseye from there.
Oh gosh. Okay. Well, thanks for the warning. Because I was telling you, like, I did skip ahead to one because it was relevant to the After Socrates series with episode 17. So I did watch episode 17. So I have a little bit of
Which one is that? Is that the Gnostic one?
yes, the Gnostic one.
Oh,
Gnosticism.
cool.
Yeah.
That's cool because it actually refers to that in this episode as well.
Yeah. It all came full circle.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really funny to be doing it this way, where we're going through this series, but also going through the other series. Well, with that being said, cognitive unison, bring it all together, right?
Yes.
So we start this episode with coordinating senses, is a, I guess, brief way of putting it, or a systematic set of insights, but you had an even longer quote.
Oh, what wisdom is. Yeah, I like to reference his little bombs of wisdom always and write that down. Like, what is wisdom? Because that's what we're after, right? Mm-hmm. I first want to say, like, so what he's doing here in this whole episode basically is trying to tell us how mindfulness trains attention to cultivate insight. Because last week we looked at they say mindfulness is being in the present moment and it cultivates insight, but how does it do that? So this is this whole episode, like, to look into how does that actually happen. So the wisdom quote that I have is, it's a systematic set of insight that are mutually related to a fundamental transformation of the person's existential mode. Maybe in simpler language, it's that aha moment that takes you from the having mode to the being mode.
Mm-hmm. Aha. You just handed me a lot of information, but now you've made me put me in the being mode of it. Okay, did you have any more on the cognitive unison? Because that's what we were like. One of the first things that we both mentioned in our prep for this was that, yeah, it's like at first it was like really dense and intimidating. Yeah. So,
And he refers like, oh, we talked about this last time, and both of us were like, okay.
okay, because we reviewed it and both of us
We
missed it.
missed that one.
Yeah.
I'm sure we understand what it means. It's just the words um, slipped us,
Yeah.
slipped
Yeah.
by our attention somehow.
Mm-hmm. He goes in to mention the Tacit Dimension book. We wanted to talk about tapping first, I think, and that whole analogy that he's using of,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. So is it in this book that they mention this cup example or
Yes.
in
That's the
tapping?
tapping experiment. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you can have awareness from the, I guess, perspective of the cup, or awareness from the perspective of the probe, and then awareness from the perspective of the finger. And I know those aren't the words that he uses as far as like perspective.
What are you aware of? That's more, where is your attention focused? Is it on your fingers when you're moving the pencil? Or is it on your, I always have a pencil in my hand, and now for some strange reason don't have a probe in my hand.
I have
Or is it
two.
on the probe itself? um, or is it on the cup? Where is your attention focused? Um, and I think the important thing here is that transparency, opacity,
Yeah.
because when your attention are on your fingers are very visible to you, opaque. But when, as soon as your awareness moves from your fingers to the probe or the pencil, um, your fingers become transparent. You're not seeing them anymore. You're seeing through them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the tapping experiment is trying to illustrate. How sometimes we use something to as a means to,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes we use it as the aim.
Yeah. 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 So we have transparency. The transparency is awareness through the
Yes.
probe of the cup. And then that would mean that the cup is the opaque object in that
Yes.
example.
Yes. Your awareness depends on where your awareness is.
Yeah, and so he also mentions that this kind of explains, or it helps to conceptualize how the spotlight metaphor misses the layered structuring of, I guess, attention and focus.
Mm. Because attention, if you look at it like flowing from um, opacity to transparency and back again, it's much more flowing than just like woo, spotlight.
Yeah.
That's I think what he means. It's like
Yeah.
it's I've got some of those lights that you can dim, and and it's something like that, that's more like a can go
Nice.
bright and
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then we have, well, this brief mention of the structure, which is what you mentioned, that attention is a structuring phenomenon.
so we can keep stepping back um, or leaning into um, to optimize um, our understanding of the structure. I think that's what he means.
Mm-hmm.
What came to mind is that what he always speaks about um, when he uses an object, and he either keeps it really close to his face and says, okay, maybe if I want to inspect the detail, this is an optimal distance, but uh, maybe this is too far if I want to see the detail, but if I want to get the whole, that's so it's this optimizing tool attention that we have.
Mm-hmm.
I think and then that's what he means.
And so then we go into this nice word of indwelling.
Yes,
which we
I
really
like that
like.
word very. And I actually quite loved this book as well. Um, Michael Pogliani, I think is how you pronounce it. Um, I don't have his other book. I do want it, but I it wasn't available on the site where I usually buy. I'm quite loyal to my site.
Nice.
And yeah, so he speaks about knowing by indwelling a lot. And I I noticed I made a little heart against it. So even when I was reading it, I was like, whoa, I love this. Indwelling, as derived from the structure of tacit knowing, is a far more precisely defined act than is empathy, and it underlies all observation. It's almost that knowing by being, right? It's really
Yeah.
like um, becoming or putting so much focus on the pencil that it becomes part of your you, and
Mm-hmm.
that to rely on a theory for understanding nature is to interiorize it. Its true knowledge lies in our ability to use it. Um, it doesn't really make as much sense as it did in my mind. These separate,
Oh, because I wanted to correct it and say becoming part of it, or yeah, instead of using it, how can you become a part of it, right?
yeah, that's in that indwelling. Your attention indwells now your fingers, then your attention indwells now the pencil, and then your intention indwells now the cup.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was telling you that Sam Harris has this in his introductory series for the Waking Up app where
Mhm.
he tells you to look at an object and like, so you're making your gaze. And then he's like, now imagine that you can see yourself from the perspective of that object. And so I went and put eyeballs on a lot of things in my, at my altar and that kind of thing. And yeah, it's like really it's an interesting practice. I always like see whenever I'm looking at my body through the perspective of whatever object, I like see a really dried up like cartoonish kind of face of mine. So it's like really funny because like just imagine your body without the essence in it. And like, well, because now I'm this
Oh,
object that has no
oh yeah,
essence, I guess, that's
yeah,
just the way that I perceive tables or amulets or whatever. And so, yeah, but that was like a really cool practice that got me into um, that mindset of being able to indwell something just never had that word. So,
yeah. He, he goes much deeper, and I think the meaning is much more complicated or rich. The meaning is much richer than what either John or me quoting these few lines really brings to the fore, because it's yeah, it's kind of like the ground of tacit knowing. And he speaks a lot about how science is also grounded in tacit knowing. Like we need we need some kind of knowing before we can theorize. And he talks about the Meno paradox. I think it's a paradox or dilemma in Plato, which John also refers to quite often. Is the problem is if we don't know something, how can we go looking for it?
yeah.
Because but if we do know something, why should we go looking for it? So that is, and then tacit knowledge is that like you have some sort of inarticulated understanding, a feeling, a hunch about something, and that is what makes it possible for you to then go and search for it.
Mm-hmm.
And for John, it's always very important to focus then on also on the other part. It's like because reality is basically, I'm saying it in my own words,
Yeah.
because reality is, we can go search for it. Because there is a ground of being, we can go search for it. So it's that trust in the intelligibility of, and intelligibility is the word he uses, the the intelligibility of reality. Uh, that because it's intelligible, we can understand it, and hence we can go search for it. That's the whole, And I think I was also thinking, because I think feminine ways of understanding is often quite tacit. Like we have
Mm,
hunches and intuitions,
yep.
and I see that when we talk to the other ladies. Like
Yeah.
a lot of the time, I hear us say, "I have this feeling, I can't really put it in words," but that's why we're speaking,
Yeah.
because it is actually important to articulate also, to bring into words our understandings. So
Yeah.
that's another uh, kind of advertising for dialectic
Yeah.
or their errors.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is like knowing through it, not knowing it is what I put. And I think that's nice because you were just talking about like the only hypothesis, like forming a hypothesis is part of the scientific method, but you can only form the hypothesis after you've like made an observation. And then, oh, okay. So now that I've made that observation, now I can form this hypothesis and search for the question, like the answer to that question, whether or not it's true.
Yeah. And sometimes the observation is not necessarily out there. Sometimes the
Yeah.
observation is in here. It's a tacit knowing, a type of hunch that scientists have.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It is. I mean, that's why you test it because you're like, is it
mm,
or is it not? Yeah. But it comes to you in like, yeah, some way. And it's just interesting, like how my senior research project got formed and things like that. I'm thinking back to it, and it is just I presented something to the professor, and then he was like, "Follow me to my office." Like it was like from a movie, like he
yeah.
had the insight, the epiphany, or whatever, and it was from gathering a bunch of knowledge, and then me adding this one thing in, and then he was like, "Whoa, yeah, totally changed the perspective."
Oh, that's
So
cool.
yeah. And so I wanted to talk about that whole the cat. I think we're there now. Um, where he writes out the word, or well, he writes out we could call them symbols, I guess, because it's a T, but then it's this thing that kind of looks like an H or an A in the middle, and then an E. And so I told you that when I first read this, I actually read it as Tay Cat because my friend has a cat whose name is Tay, and she always calls her Tay Cat. And I was going to text her and be like, "Look, girl, there's talking about Tay Cat here." And then I realized because he went on further that I was actually supposed to be looking at that, like what, or read it as the cat because that's what our mind would normally do. So it was interesting because my actual the framing or the perspective from which I was seeing that and was aware of that was take at because I had that in my head, that perspective. So
How our past and our experiences frames our way of seeing.
mm-hmm.
That's sometimes we're the exception.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I go back to that a lot with science that we rule out the outliers because we're like, this is the average of what happens. So let's take this part of the graph and just look at this part of the graph because it's relevant because there's a pattern here. It's like, oh, okay. The rest doesn't matter.
Maybe because we're kind of outsiders, we're kind of weird. So we're like, no, no, the rest should matter. Please,
Yeah.
please, can we
Yeah.
also matter?
It's funny because it's the Aquarius new moon and the Aquarius is the outlier. So
Yes.
the letters with this example are the features and then the words are the gestalt. Or I think maybe we can use eidos there too because that was the word that I got used to and now he started to use gestalt. Is it the same? Are they synonyms or
I think so
okay.
because it's form. When you said gestalt, what was okay the form and
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
eidos, and I'm trying to have an insight into eidos. So let's use the word as often as possible.
Okay, cool. Okay, I think
I
this
wrote down the words: the dynamic self-organizing process is optimized by mindfulness. So this is something that we do naturally as human beings. We move up and down, this, and that's what he tried to illustrate with this their cat. We move up and down spontaneously our attention between the features and the eidos, or the just gestalt, yeah, for me it's gestalt, because my
yeah.
language is we so maybe better idols though.
Well,
But we can optimize this movement through practicing mindfulness. That's what he's saying. Because remember, the
yeah,
whole episode is like, why does mindfulness bring insight? And so that's why.
I see. Okay, so because like you're refining that ability to move in and out,
Yes.
and then from that, the mindfulness can bring about an insight.
Yes. But it goes further. That's when he gets to his schema.
Oh yeah, you ready to move into it?
Yes.
Yeah.
The meditation and contemplation, because I think that makes sense of the schema.
Okay. Okay.
The schema in itself is basically like, so he's bringing these two together, like flowing out and flowing in. That's one of opacity to transparency, and transparency to opacity.
Yep.
And then we have this vertical dimension of features to gestalt or eidos, and back again, like gestalt to features, features to gestalt. So this is the schema, the basic lines of the schema. It's the transparency, opacity lines, and the features, gestalt lines. That is the basic structure. And these are all things that human beings do naturally, but we can fine tune it through mindfulness. That's what this is. And then he specifies what exactly does he mean with mindfulness. And then he gets into those beautiful explanations of meditation and contemplation.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that was like how is through so the scaling down and scaling up as they relate. Scaling down would be meditation and scaling up would be contemplation, because he's got it listed out as meditation is moving towards the center and looking at sensations instead of through them. And so like feelings of sensation of the abdomen, and then two, you break up the gestalt up into features through this process. So like he kind of like gave those two steps of like feeling into the sensations of the abdomen, and then
So
breaking up.
he mentions both lines. He mentions both the horizontal and the vertical line in this meditation explanation that you just gave.
Okay. Okay. So you're saying like from the transparency, opacity, and also gestalt and
yes,
features.
because that's what you just said.
Yeah,
does reflect
yeah. Oh, is it? And then
see, this is why it's important to talk about these things, because
yeah.
like I sometimes have it as well. Like while I'm saying something, I'm like, oh, that's what it's meant.
Yeah,
Like it's my own words, but it's like, okay, I didn't.
I had to hear it 3 times and then write it down, and then also hear you say it after I said it. Yeah. There it is.
Hey, that's how you learn. That's how you learn.
Yeah, yeah. And then there's contemplation, which I love this, that mention of temple being in the middle, and temple having meant looking up towards the divine part of the sky. And then you look in order to see signs from the gods. He mentions this word theoria, which is to see more deeply into reality.
I love it.
Me too. Then he mentions like the ecology of practices here again. Like, okay, so now we need a system of psychotechnologies to optimize cognition for insight using the meditation, contemplation, and probably other things, I'm assuming.
Yes, which I told you what was great about this episode was I watched it and then I followed John's online meditation course, and then I came back and watched it again, and it just like popped like, oh yeah, now I get so much more, and now I'm getting more even. So it's John's like Plato in that you can keep returning to him and discover new things. That's great.
Yeah.
And do not quote me on saying John's like Plato. He will hate that. But because he's very humble. That's why he would hate that, not because he despises Plato, of
Right.
course. And he has the meditation practices that he teaches in that course, and he has these contemplative practices as well, metta, which he refers to here. And I think Sam Harris also has it on his
Yes, he
app.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah. He said something in that moment about meta meditation and how it's scaling. I think it was scaling up.
Yeah, because it's a contemplative.
That's really cool. When he said that, I was
Yeah.
like, well, because it's indwelling.
Mm.
And then so you indwell whoever it is that you love, or whatever it is that you love, with the meta meditation. And then you turn it back onto yourself. And
Or
that
you fully indwell the love. That could also be a
mm,
way to see it.
I hadn't even
Because
gotten to that.
because that's what you touch or see them through is the love. So you
Yeah.
go into fully indwelling the love, and then through that you touch them. Um,
Wow.
yeah,
Cool.
that's
I hadn't gotten to that point in it yet. Like I was still, you know, imagine somebody that you love, and then at the end of the meditation, it's imagine you now in that place
yeah.
of those people that you've been. So,
John starts it the other way around. He starts with you, and then you go
mm,
out to other people.
mm.
Uh.
I guess Sam Harris and I feel like it's harder to love ourselves.
No, I don't want to go
I'm
into
joking.
anything personal,
Actually, Sam
but
Harris's birthday is the day before mine, so it's really fun.
oh,
Yeah,
nine.
yeah,
Okay.
we have that in common.
And I also want to mention then, because later John mentions the word prajna, and he also has then this prajna meditation that he teaches, which is meditation contemplation combined. So it's vipassana. I never know how to pronounce that.
Sounds right.
And metta, and then you do it together. So, and
Nice.
that then brings us to what he says, like for insight, um, um, you need these two moments, and that is the prajna, the two coming together. Is this where he refers to the 9 dot problem again?
Yeah, he goes into the 9 dot problem a lot in this section. Um,
But basically, what he's using it here is to illustrate these two moments for insight. What you need to do, you
yeah,
you need to break up an inappropriate frame,
yeah.
the box, seeing it as a box, and you can't just stay there, because then you will choke.
Mm-hmm.
You need to make an alternative and better frame.
Yeah. Yeah, and even with that break up an inappropriate frame, he also had to de-automatize the cognition. Otherwise, you choke those two
Yeah.
together, and then
De-automate your cognition is very, very cool way to say that, because that is exactly, we have such automized ways of seeing that, and understanding, that we need to de-automize it. It's a really nice way to say that.
it is, yeah, because it's one of the things that I've gathered or picked up from meditation is that pause. You're not doing anything, you're not going to act on any of those thoughts that you have, and so that de-automatizes my response, like my quick response to everything. It's like, okay, from this I've at least gotten the ability to kind of sit through my feelings, feel them, and not react because of them. Okay, and then yeah, so we have to make a new frame and to
So
scale.
breaking up the inappropriate frame, this de-automation is scaling down. It's
Mm-hmm.
indeed that meditation part, that moving through the opacity, transparency, to the thing that normally sees becomes transparent, and then you see something deeper.
Yeah, the observed and the observer.
Yeah.
Who is that observer?
The elusive eye.
Mm-hmm. So I have the analogy of you have to make the new frame to scale up, because otherwise it's like I've just sat on my glasses and broke them, and now I can't use them. And there's like this, what am I gonna do? I gotta get a new set of glasses.
See, that's why we need someone like John Vervaeke. He's always just taking his glasses off and cleaning them. We putzes, we sit on our glasses. It's like
exactly. Oh yeah.
And just leaves us without a rug.
Right. Yeah, most people would. But he's like, I'm gonna put him back on. Don't worry.
Maybe you need that to make an alternative and better frame.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we were speaking before, we said that both of us are more inclined to making leaps. But actually, I'm thinking now, if we have so many rug pull moments, then maybe it's actually the other one, that we're very much inclined to breaking frame.
Yeah.
But then we tend to, like, I'm because of my chronic cheerfulness, I would be like, holy fuck, my whole frame just fell apart. And I was like, oh, well, here I go.
Yeah.
And then you just leave it for future Lizelle to deal with.
Right.
And somehow she always manages. But it will probably be wiser to actually, but maybe that's what we're trying to do here, right? We're trying to make an alternative and better frame.
Yeah. 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 And then he does mention, of course, that's the thing, that there's problems that you can go too far into scaling up or scaling down. For instance, like, well, it's basically everything that we just said, but I just have it like summarized here. To scale down is meditation that improves your chances for an insight by breaking up a bad frame, but it can mess you up because it causes you to choke. And you had that great analogy with dancing.
Yeah. Well, there's the story of the centipede, but there's also just, if you just think of normal dancing, like if you're just flowing with the music and, going with the rhythm, and then all of a sudden someone tells us, you like, oh, you're such a great dancer. What exactly are you doing? And then you start to focus, paying attention to what you're doing, where you're putting your feet, how you're moving your shoulders, how you're shaking your booty. And it's like, then all of a sudden it just feels wrong, right? It's like that whole flow is just gone. It's like, yeah. So don't do that. If someone's dancing, don't tell them they're good dancers, because
yeah or sparring. Yeah, that was the example he used.
Yeah.
Even I find this when I'm spelling words out, if I take too long to spell the word and go over it too many times, I'm like, I don't know, I might need to look it up now.
Or sometimes just when I say a word, then even like the most basic words, when I say them, I'm like, this is a very weird word. Like, is this actually a word? And then, so
yeah
if you overthink things, you choke.
You choke. Yep. And then there's scale up, which is contemplation. Let me see if I can squeeze this in. It says improves ability for insight by causing you to make a better frame, but it can also cause you to leap into an inappropriate frame and be locked in fixation. So not too tight, not too loose.
Yeah, what I also really liked about when he was talking about this, sometimes he just says sentences that's like, oh, that's such an awesome sentence, because it's so nonsense. Or this is also kind of like a koan. Both make you better, but there's a problem, because both also make you worse. And that is exactly that. When you don't do it separately, that is what he means. I think if you only focus on the one or focus on the other one. But what also came to mind, and maybe I'm jumping to an inappropriate frame here, but what also came to mind was what he always says, like, the same machinery that makes you highly adaptable makes you prone to bullshit.
Yeah. I had that same thought.
Maybe not so much choking, but definitely leaping to inappropriate frames. That is a very nice way to say bullshit. So
yeah
and that
inappropriate framing.
Yeah.
So now there's this question of, how is being present making us more insightful, and the question of what is mindfulness. And he says here that, well, I guess there's this, summary also of mystical experiences that I wrote down first.
Can I just, because I wrote down what he says, what is mindfulness doing?
Yeah.
And then he's got quite nice words.
Nice.
So mindfulness is basically teaching us how to appropriate and train a flexibility of attentional scaling so that we can intervene effectively in how we are framing our problems and increase the chances of insight when insight is needed. Also thought that was an interesting add-on, when insight is needed.
Yeah.
So,
right. Yeah, because I guess you can't stay in this eternal state of insightfulness.
the eternal aha.
Ah.
Eureka. Just stay in the bath.
Yeah, stay at the ashram. So I put down these mystical experiences as the scaling down perpetually, which he says Foreman calls this the pure consciousness event.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the experience after extensive mindfulness practice, so being fully present as consciousness. So there's no being that's observing consciousness, or so it's just this pure consciousness event. And then scaling really far up, there's this resonant at one-ment. Everything is interconnected, it's super flowing. But he says here, but we want both. We want both of those. And so then he mentions this other type of experience, which he's calling non-duality, that it is both, and then it transcends both. And so he's saying that he has this practice of inhaling to scale up into that super flowing reality, and then exhale to scale down into that pure consciousness event.
That's the prajna that he's teaching.
Gotcha.
In his meditation course. I think it's, maybe you can, because you've been meditating for a while, maybe you can jump to just that one, just the prajna one, because you do metta and you do vipassana. So I would recommend, I think it's, it's named, and I think it's around number 10 or 8, maybe. It's he teaches prajna. It's a really cool experience too. But he also teaches this in after Socrates.
Okay.
So basically, but
and that prajna state you were saying is wisdom, right? Is that what the word means?
That's what the word means. Yeah, that's is it Sanskrit? I'm not sure what the language is.
I think, I mean, the ancient Indian is Sanskrit. So
a comprehensive capacity for insight is wisdom then. And then he says something which I thought was also, because this is also basically then another definition of wisdom. You are going to have insight into the fundamental, the guts, the grammar, the pattern that I added, of the agent arena relationship. So who you are in the big picture.
That makes sense. Wow. I like that. It's
Sati.
Remembering. You said sati right when I said remembering, becoming a member again. Yeah. Love that word. Still love that word. Sati. Remembered the being mode. So in this part, he goes into, did you have any more to say on non-duality? Because then he moves into Siddhartha again, our good friend Siddhartha, who had combined the Vipassana and the Metta and then reached that state of awakening or enlightenment. And there was a radical transformation. So after the awakening, he says that his visage had changed and that he was flowing, and people noticed it about him, and they're asking him questions. And one of those questions was, "Are you a god?" And because there was many more questions before that, but are you a god? And then
don't you just get so tired when people keep asking you that?
I know, just It actually came up in the after Socrates, this really interesting guy was in one of the breakout rooms, and he asked straight up, which kind of like archetype are you carrying with you? Like it
Oh,
was
cool.
almost like he sensed it about me. I was like, wow. Well, because I was wearing my outfit. I wore it intentionally to
Oh,
embody the priestess again while I was there. But I was like, wow, thanks for asking. So it
oh,
was
it's
actually,
great.
oh man, I failed. I should have said I'm aware. like like Siddhartha said, because in this they ask him
Awake.
if he's an angelic messenger, if he's a prophet, or is he just a man? No, not just a man. Well, then what are you? He says, I am aware,
Awake. Doesn't he say I'm
awake.
awake?
Yes, so I just can't read my handwriting. I am awake. That's funny.
But saying in that context of the Stoa after Socrates saying I am aware is much more profound than saying I'm awake, because that could be interpreted really superficially, like
I am not sleeping. Well, that's funny because we're talking about the sleeping, but and then he just goes like naturally right into this whole idea of awakening in contrast to dreaming. Because the question is, why do people pursue altered states? And it uh,
mhm,
because why can some substances bring about a powerful transformation in this way of the altered states? Um, so we were just talking about sleeping, and then he goes right into awakening in contrast to dreaming. You can realize that the dream wasn't real when you wake up. And in a similar way, when someone's like using and kind of abusing a substance, they might say that wasn't real. I was high. Okay, but then there are some people that have an altered state and find out what is really real. He says it's axial.
yes. Important here to mention, because John often points it out, like not what is really real in the sense of propositions, but getting getting a feel of reality, getting feeling as if you get in touch with something more real. I wrote down here because I was also, of course, thinking about contemplating, I guess is the right word, my personal experiences. And then I wrote, I don't think I've ever touched the really real, but I do think the really real has touched me. It's so
I like that.
it's that experience of participating in the really real. But he warns, be careful if you come out, not to cling to the propositions. If you got any propositions, don't cling to that,
Yeah.
because people come out and say, um, I know now that there is a God, or other people come out, I know now that there is no God.
Mm-hmm.
And if these altered states could teach us true propositional knowing, everyone would come out with the same propositions. But
Mm.
so clearly that is not the case. That it does not teach us true propositions, but it does get us in contact with something real. Not
Mm-hmm.
always, but sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because I told you like I keep going back to the vision quest and like being in that altered state of not having had food or water made me, the realization that I had that what was really real to me was that I needed to spend more time with my family.
Mm.
And of course, that's great in theory or in, like in this magical Pleasantville world that we live in. But to be very honest with you, like I can't be around my family all the time because oh, I can't take it. Like mentally, I can't take it because it isn't just this whole, movie of us watching something together and it's like all nice and
Yeah,
Disney.
yeah.
It's dealing with the fact that people are dying and people are observing people dying, and it's like it's much more difficult to just
Mm-hmm.
do
Mm-hmm.
that idealized, yeah, picture that I was like, this is the truth.
Yes, I have. actually examples of similar things. When I was a teenager, I was very religious, and I was living in a country where everybody was Christians, basically. So they every holiday we would have camps, Christian camps,
Mhm.
and then you would come back all hyped up. You've had many mystical, well, not everybody maybe, but I've had many mystical experience, because you
Mhm.
sing, you dance, you pray a lot, you do all kinds of spiritual things. And you would be in the state of, oh, I'm going to be a loving person and embody Jesus and just be nice to my family. And then family happens.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not so easy. It's
No.
not so easy. But yeah, it's yeah. You do
Yeah.
get in touch maybe with the really real in an aspirational manner.
Yep.
And it is not necessarily something that you can immediately be or maybe ever be,
Yeah.
but it is always that star. Jordan Peterson always speaks of the star, that star you can keep your eye on
Yeah.
as you are.
Well, that's really funny that he says star because in astrology, of course, the sun is the ideal to which you strive. So that's like it's like not attainable, really. I mean,
Yeah,
but you just continue to strive to be that. So yeah, that's what came to mind whenever he said that part.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, but it's just a model. And then also in gene keys, they have this idea of different frequencies. There's a shadow frequency, a gift frequency, and the siddhi. And you're supposed to stay at the gift frequency, but you visit the siddhi. Like you don't actually get
Oh,
to stay with the siddhi's
oh,
frequency, but you just visit with it.
oh.
So yeah, very cool that
Yeah,
it
that's a
continues to
cool
come
way
up.
to say it.
Yeah.
Because you can't stay in a mystical experience as well. I think that would be very awkward.
It would be you're in an asylum because people think you're insane, frankly. Like I've been there. I've tried to stay there and yeah, you look crazy to the physical world. So they'll kick you out.
Yeah.
Um okay, and so as I change myself to try and recapture, I want to live in greater contact with the really real is the quote that I have here. And it kind of takes us back to Plato's cave in that story of what's really real and coming into contact with it, changing yourself. Um,
It
so
might be
speak.
interesting to know that you don't know what quote I'm going to read at the end.
Yeah. Oh, well, now it's even more interesting. um. All right. So then we get into this idea of quantum change theory.
Great theory, bad name.
Bad name.
Well, bad name, good theory. What's his exact words?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's what he said. Bad name. Good theory. Bad name.
And I get why it's a bad name. I get why it's a bad name for
So,
John,
yeah.
especially.
So for that book, it's like the higher states of consciousness that empower, encourage, and challenge us to engage in such quantum transformation. Is that kind of the um,
Yes. What
summary?
is
Is the higher states allow us to engage in that quantum transformation?
yes? What might be interesting to know is that they actually split it up in two different quantum change events. There's the deep insight, life changing insights, and then there's the mystical experience. And the insights, the one of the stories is a man sitting on a beach somewhere, and he's reading books about someone else who happened to be an alcoholic, and he's like, oh, you know what, I drink too much as well, I should stop drinking. And that's that insight which then changes his life. And the mystical experiences, there's a one man who was driving in his car in a very barren landscape apparently, and then all of a sudden everything, he had this at one ment experience, I think. Everything just became super vibrant, and he had this whole sensation of the oneness of everything. And just while driving, and then he had to stop, and he happened to have been recording a message to his friends, so then he recorded exactly like as it was happening.
Oh wow.
And yeah, so stories like that. So this is the two different versions of this quantum change. So it can be just like a kind of normal ordinary day insight, but then because you act on it,
Yeah.
because you choose to commit yourself into this new way of being, it does transform your life. It transforms your character. It transforms who you are. um, or this, and many people have mystical experiences, I imagine, and well, I know, and then come out uh, because they don't make a choice to commit to this living in greater contact with what's the really real. um, that's it, you know, it's just, it was nice, but
Yeah, we were talking about like festivals like Burning Man, for instance, where people will go and they do the whole thing, and I think like the concept of Burning Man like came from a genuine, true, and beautiful thing, but then there's no enactment of that. I knew some people do actually have Burning Mans in several different places, and maybe they run them all year or whatever. They actually
Mhm.
do commit to that type of trade community or whatever. But a lot of it now is just all the festivals now are commercialized. It's, you know, it's kind of gross because now it's just, yeah, it's just like, let's all get together, get real fucked up for a week, get real dirty and like experience this and then just go back to life as it normally is, as I've been living it in this, glorifying the material. And yeah, it doesn't transform anymore. Where I think that the concept of bringing that into reality is like, wow, those were some, forward thinkers or whatever. Like, let's experiment with it. Let's start to play. Let's start to practice it and see if we could bring it into reality. But the reality that was created from it is so American in that it just became a McDonald's version of, real food or whatever. Like, it's just superficial.
Mm. And that's exactly it. The words that you use, bringing into reality. It's having these experiences of the really real, and then realizing it into reality
Mm,
through daily choices and practices.
yeah.
That is what leads to quantum change. Not, I can't pronounce change. Neither change like nor chains. My Afrikaans tongue has difficulty with with it. But yeah, so it sounds the same in my mind. Chains and change.
It sounds the same to me when you're saying it. I'm like, what is she trying to say?
That's why I mention it. Like, it's not quantum chains. It's like that would be.
Yeah, okay, I hear you now. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So there's like the modal shift comes back up there of
Yeah.
recognizing the being mode and really becoming a member, remembering.
Because that's exactly, if we then get back to your Burning Man example, it
Mhm.
was a being mode experience, which now have turned into an absolute having mode experience.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
We're having these experiences for a week and then we go back
Yeah.
to
Even like,
having.
yeah, just like the with Burning Man, it's even like the inability to get a ticket to it, like the inaccessibility of that. It is really like it's either a club, a big club, and you're not a part of it kind of thing. And, like that's not really embodying this reality of bartering system and like, let's,
Of interconnectedness and
no, it's like we're an
as one.
exclusive group.
Yeah.
You're not allowed in, which fine, that's fine. I never wanted to go anyway, especially not
Well,
now.
that does sound a bit like a burnt ego speaking there.
I think it is. I never got to
Yeah, what
go to burn it, so
I
um
I I did feel very sad when I read this, and then when I think of this, like how we jump from one Burning Man experience or one festival experience, getting high on artificial methods, because this, like told you, this felt to me like just these insights that I experience as so profound is actually so basic, and it's like it makes me feel like such a or that I read of that people experience as so profound. And it makes me feel so, are we never going to grow up? You know? And it makes me really sad for humanity, and for me then as part of humanity, of course. And this also chasing festival and festival high to high, because of that, when he mentioned that it is deep connection between, there's a deep connection, he says, between how often you flow and how meaningful your life is, and more radically so even between these experiencing these moments of atonement or pure consciousness or the non-duality. So people start chasing them desperately because of this hunger we have for meaning.
Mm-hmm.
But we have such difficulty realizing it in reality. In the day, what we talked about earlier, coming back from that camp or that vision quest and actually practicing what our soul have been preaching to us at those experiences. It's challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it almost feels like a miracle has to happen, you know? Like we need to awaken. It's something that it needs to be a complete shift in our way of being for this to be lasting and not sad.
Yeah. I mean, for some reason, the environmental situation came up in my head, like facts, numbers. I don't know any of the stuff. What I do know is that we're dumping waste products into the environment. Okay. I don't care about global warming. I don't care about all these theories that you guys are coming up with. It's clearly wrong. It's clearly wrong. Obviously, you don't shit where you eat. So why are we going to dump shit where we eat? As far as like this, the space is concerned. So yeah, like we have to have that insight, that epiphany as a collective, that making more stuff is great when you're like inventing, and this is how you invent, because you've got to make more stuff, and then you can figure out a new way of making stuff, and then you get to make more stuff, and it's like, but hold the fucking phone for a second, like realize we're not going to have anything to work with here pretty soon, and it's not about humanity. We're going to die and Earth is going to be fine. We don't have to save the planet. The planet saves itself. The planet knows how to get rid of our shit. And it's like, well, let me kill these motherfuckers. And then I can clean up, use some mushrooms, get this thing going back. It's not. So for the sake of humanity, for the sake of ourselves, and for the sake of progressing into the future and moving ourselves into the future, it's not about like, let's get our stuff together because we'll run out of resources. That's your concern? Because we'll run out? Okay. Well, let's think about like cleaning up after ourselves and just being stewards of this planet. Like that's the reason. And that's got to be the shift. It can't be about, well, we won't have anything to make anything if we don't stop making things. And, no, it's like, no, just like recognize your place in this of we're the stewards. We're the ones that have the ability to use our psyche and move about and shift things. And in fact, somebody was talking about, I think it was Russell Brand. Oh no, it was Graham Hancock talking about how the rainforest, the Amazon rainforest, was actually cultivated. It was actually like not like a man-made thing, but they selected the trees that they wanted, and then those trees, all grew together. And so like there was, and I don't know facts, so you fact check me all you want to, but Graham Hancock is already somebody that everybody reels against anyways in the standard scientific community, so I don't really care. But it is an interesting idea that people were so at one with the earth that they saw their place as, I'm going to be the one that's cultivating this and building it in a way that it helps me. Yeah, because I need food. So yeah, she's going to give me food if I'm catering to her and taking care of her. But this whole idea of like, Well, because we have limited resources is just such a perverted way of looking at the whole problem to me.
Yeah. We need a fundamental insight into what it is to be a human being. And while you were speaking, the next Buddha could be the Sangha thing just became super real, because it's not really my heart is actually racing a little bit now. It's not actually a matter anymore of, oh, that will be cool. It's like, having a super kind of Burning Man experience, all of us together. No, it's a matter of life and death. If we as humanity, not just one or two people, but the Sangha of humanity, don't wake the fuck up, we're gonna kill ourselves. And maybe it's already too late. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe that's the intention, honestly. Like,
Yeah.
part of me is wondering if the entire human race is suicidal in that way.
And that's why, indeed, like you mentioned once, I can't remember exactly where, like, that's why AI is there. Consciousness can't be killed. Consciousness is too precious.
Yeah.
But
Whoa, that got deep. Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of important.
Yeah. I would say, yeah.
But yeah, I do think humanity has a very deep suicidal tendency in us.
Because there's that, I mean, it's this whole series. It's like, because there's no meaning in it. It doesn't, rocks aren't alive, so they're meaningless. And so, yeah, that's why this is so important, to have these kinds of conversations in the consciousness, in the collective consciousness, because we have to realize what we're doing to ourselves by thinking that we have no meaning and no and realizing, like, you have to make the meaning. Yeah, like, it's not like you're inherently born with meaning. You make the meaning. That's the point. And how do you do that? You refine your ability to see your place in the arena.
We were talking about the power of the human mind last time. We need to realize that as well. We have the fucking power that we need to create a more beautiful reality. Or as Charles Eisenstein says, the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. We have that.
Yeah.
So we have actually the meaning. We just need to wake up to it, to who we truly are, and what beautiful gifts we've been given as a species.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that profound change, or that profound transformation, happens a lot in many different cultures. And so I was kind of alluding there to that perennial philosophy book, the one that you have.
Yeah. So are we done yet? Because maybe we can end with a quote. Or
yeah, that's what I was thinking. Did you have anything else to add in?
Well,
we kind of went off the rails a little bit.
Well, we stuck to the meaning crisis. So
yeah.
And to John's work. So
yeah.
John's The Nature of Attention, The Nature of Mindfulness, and the enhancement of the ability to enter into the higher stage of consciousness that can significantly elevate existential distress and bring about a profound level of optimization of our insights and our capacity for finding our lives meaningful. So basically what we said.
Yeah. So that's what the higher states do. They bring about that profound transformation.
It could.
Ah.
It could.
Oof. Because, yeah, if you don't bring it home.
Yes, if you don't bring it home. If you don't realize the real. So, yeah, I thought I had Huxley's perennial philosophy. I also was quite sure I had his Doors of Perception, but I can't find that either. But this was the book, which is Arthur Fish Lewis, which is actually, this book is recommended by John. Huxley's perennial philosophy is not recommended by John because of philosophical reasons around perennial philosophy, and not anything to do with Huxley himself. He just thinks I think what he hints at this episode is Huxley sees everything is just the same. And he's like, no, no, not quite. So something like that. But then I paged through it anyway, because that's what I do. And I found a passage that I highlighted. And I thought, oh, this is actually quite a cool way to end today's conversation. None of this may resonate with you. Indeed, you might be inclined to dismiss it all out of hand. Still, perhaps in reading this, you have felt something stir in you. Perhaps it is oddly familiar to you, and perhaps you feel the inclination to investigate further. You might turn to the dialogues of that sly old rascal Plato, to the austere beauty of Plotinus's Aeneas, to the dense prose of Damascius, to the pure descriptions of Dionysius the Areopagite, to the gnomic words of Meister Eckhart, or to the sage advice of the author of the Book of Privy Council. You could do worse, but beware. Once you begin, you may find whole new worlds and ways of seeing this world open up for you. It might begin the most extraordinary journey one could undertake. Who knows? At the very least, one might find oneself poking one's head, even for a moment, out of the cave.
Yeah. Did mention the cave. Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I mean, the same sentiment goes for everything that we said about the environmental crisis, all that. Maybe it doesn't resonate, but maybe. Beautiful. Awesome. Okay. Well, we've got After Socrates coming up tomorrow too. So that's to review episode 4.
Yeah, the Stoa after Socrates.
The Stoa after
we've
Socrates.
Got the Stoa after Socrates.
Yes, I'm really bad about putting in the words where they need to be because I just take over. That's twice now. We were awakening from the meaning crisis, not practicing, and now we're okay. But yeah, the Stoa after Socrates on Sundays at noon Toronto time, so that's Eastern time, and so we'll be meeting there. And if you're interested, join us.
That's one way to maybe wake up
and philosophize. So with that being said, we will see you in the next episode.